The destruction of the Varnax capital sent shockwaves through the galaxy, leaving entire civilizations questioning their assumptions about humanity. The Galactic Tribunal, once a united front of ancient races and vast empires, found itself fractured, caught between fear and anger at humanity's unprecedented rise. No longer were humans the underdogs, the newcomers with no place in the stars. They had become a galactic power in their own right, feared, respected, and, for many, a growing threat. Back on Earth, President Alina Sykes stood before her people in a rare public address. The television screens flickered to life across the planet, the familiar face of their leader appearing on millions of homes worldwide. She had become a symbol of humanity's resilience, but also of its iron will. "We did not ask for this war," Sykes began, her voice steady yet filled with unyielding conviction. "We did not choose to fight, but we were given no choice, and now the galaxy knows what humanity is capable of. We have faced the darkness before, and we have emerged victorious. But let us be clear, this was not a victory we sought. This is a victory we earned." The broadcast was met with a mixture of awe and unease. Humanity had won, no one could deny that, but at what cost? The destruction of the Varnax homeworld, the catastrophic loss of life, and the devastation of an entire civilization weighed heavily on the conscience of a species that had once sought peace. Now, humanity was a new power on the galactic stage, and with that power came a heavy responsibility. In the corridors of Earth's War Council, there were murmurs of unease. The war had not ended. The Draveri, who had already suffered significant losses in the previous battles, now realized that the humans had not only survived, they had surpassed their expectations. The Tribunal's factions were no longer unified, and a schism began to form among the galactic powers. Some, like the Creel, saw humanity as a necessary balance to the rising Varnax influence, while others, like the Draveri, vowed vengeance for the destruction of their fleet. Admiral Arlen Voss sat in his command chair, watching the tactical readouts as the human fleet prepared for the next phase of the war. Their forces had not only broken the back of the Varnax Empire, they had disrupted the balance of the entire galactic order. But Voss knew that victory could be fleeting if they weren't careful. "We've earned their respect," Voss said, his voice heavy with the weight of the future. "But that respect comes with a price. Every faction out there is watching us now. The Draveri are angry. The Creel are calculating, and we're surrounded by enemies who have never seen a human fleet fight like this." Sykes, who had joined him at the tactical display, nodded. "We can't afford to back down now. We've taken a huge risk, but we've forced the galaxy to recognize us. We've given them a reason to fear us, but we've also given them a reason to negotiate." The war was no longer a simple matter of survival. It was now about shaping the future of humanity in a galaxy that had thought of itself as invincible. The human fleet was undefeated, and their newfound power was undeniable. But even as Earth's forces prepared for the next engagement, the growing uncertainty was palpable. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, but now the question was whether they would shape it or destroy it. Would they use their power to create a new era of peace, or would they become the very thing they had fought so hard against, the oppressor, the conqueror? President Sykes knew the answer, even if she had not spoken it aloud. Humanity's future could not be left to the whims of the old powers. They had fought for sovereignty, for freedom, and for survival. And in the depths of space, among the stars, humanity would create its own destiny. It was a future forged in blood, but it was one they would control, not anyone else. "We've taken the first step," Sykes said quietly. "Now we finish what we started." And so, the next phase of humanity's rise began. As the Tribunal fractured, and the galaxy reeled from the shock of the Varnax fall, one thing was clear: humanity had risen, and they were not going to retreat. The tension between humanity and the Galactic Tribunal was palpable, but it took a simple mistake to ignite the fire. The Lesser Gate, a vital wormhole junction, had long been a source of skirmishes between the human frontier colonies and the Draveri Empire. Both sides had claimed it as theirs, But the tribunal had maintained a fragile, uneasy peace through their centuries-old treaties. The Draveri, with their natural arrogance, had assumed that humanity would back down when pressed. They were wrong. On a crisp morning, a human exploration vessel, the Astrid Lynn, was conducting a routine survey in the neutral zone near the Lissar Gate. It was an unassuming ship, its sleek design and non-threatening mission meant to maintain Earth's neutral standing in the sector. But the Draveri warship Obsidian Fang had other plans. Without warning, the Obsidian Fang opened fire, sending plasma bolts that tore into the Astrid Lynn's hull. The human crew had barely enough time to activate their shields before the blast sent them into an uncontrolled spin. Communication lines crackled with static, but the message was clear. You are trespassing on Draveri territory. Leave immediately or face annihilation. It was a calculated insult. The Draveri were testing humanity, believing their technologically superior weapons would send a message of dominance. They were wrong again. Back on Earth, the Council erupted into chaos. President Alina Sykes paced in her private war room, her eyes scanning the digital maps of the situation. The Draveri had not only attacked a human vessel, but had done so in the shadow of the Tribunal's neutral zone, a direct challenge to humanity's claim on its newly formed place in the galaxy. The message was clear. The Tribunal had sided with the Draveri, and humanity was now alone. The crew of the Astrid Lynn sent out a distress signal as they activated their emergency protocols, but it would take them too long to escape. Captain Arlen Voss, one of the Terran fleet's most skilled tacticians, and a man who had seen Earth's wars firsthand, was immediately called into action. He knew the situation would spiral out of control fast if humanity didn't act quickly. We can't wait for orders, Voss said, turning to his tactical team. The Draveri just drew a line in the sand. If we don't respond, we may as well start packing up our things and head home. Sykes, watching from Earth's command center, was resolute. Prepare for engagement. Give the Draveri one warning shot, and then we retaliate. It's time they learned who they're dealing with. Voss smiled grimly. He knew this was no longer just a simple border skirmish. This was the beginning of a new kind of war, one where humanity had no choice but to fight for its survival. The human fleet, including Voss's flagship Fortress Pride, powered up their hyperdrives and engaged full battle readiness. Their first task was to locate the Obsidian Fang and neutralize it before it could damage the Astrid Lynn further. Within hours, the fleet was in position, their weapons humming with barely contained energy. Captain, we have the Draveri ship in our sights, his weapons officer reported, a cold edge to his voice. Shields up. All stations are green. Voss's eyes narrowed. Target their engines and weapon systems. No mercy. If we let them escape, this will never end. The battle that followed was a fierce, chaotic confrontation. The Draveri ship, surprised by the ferocity of the human response, attempted to flee, but it was no match for the relentless fire of the human tactical strike. Within minutes, the Obsidian Fang's engines were crippled, and its weapons were disabled. It was clear now. The Draveri would no longer control the space they thought was theirs. The Astrid Lynn limped into safety, its crew battered but alive. As the human fleet pulled back to regroup, the galaxy held its breath. Humanity had struck back with unexpected ferocity. The message was now clear. The humans were not to be underestimated, and humanity had only just begun. The time had come. Humanity stood on the precipice of a new era, one forged by their blood, their sacrifices, and their unyielding will. The Galactic Tribunal, though fractured and weakened by the fall of the Varnax, had not yet abandoned its quest for dominance. The Draveri, still seething from the loss of their fleets, were preparing to strike, their forces swelling in numbers as their hatred for humanity burned brighter with each passing day. The Creel, ever calculating, had offered their support, but their motives were unclear. Humanity could not afford to trust them completely. Admiral Voss paced in the war room aboard the Fortress Pride, the heart of the human fleet. The strategic displays flickered with the movements of the remaining tribunal forces, their fleets slowly converging on key locations throughout the galaxy. The humans had learned to anticipate their enemies' tactics, but the odds were now more dire than ever. The final battle was approaching, a battle that would decide whether humanity would stand tall as a free, independent power or be crushed under the weight of galactic hegemony. "Admiral," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Sarah Whittaker, her face tight with exhaustion, but her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "The Draveri are almost in range. Their fleet is bigger than we thought. The Creel have already pulled back. They're watching, but they won't commit." Voss nodded, rubbing the stubble on his chin. "I had a feeling the Creel wouldn't stay. They want us to bleed, to weaken ourselves before they make their move." The humans had seen it coming. The Creel were interested in one thing: power, and they were waiting to see if humanity would be weakened enough by the Tribunal and Draveri to make a clean conquest. They might be allies now, but Voss knew they would never truly be on humanity's side. The Creel would strike when it was advantageous. "Prepare the fleet," Voss commanded, his voice sharp and unwavering. "We can't wait any longer. It's time we took the fight to them." The War Council agreed. The humans would push forward, determined to engage the Tribunal and Draveri in a decisive strike. But as the ships prepared to launch, President Sykes issued one final directive. "We've won every battle by surviving, by adapting. But this time, we must show the galaxy something else. We're not the hunted. We're the hunters." Voss met her gaze, understanding the weight of her words. They had survived, but now they would take the fight to the heart of the Tribunal. They would make a final stand that would determine whether humanity's future would be one of continued survival or obliteration. As the human fleet entered the heart of the Tribunal's territory, it became clear that this would be the most difficult battle yet. The Draveri fleet, vast and unforgiving, stood in their way, their ships looming like dark predators in the cold expanse of space. But the human fleet was unyielding. They had learned from every previous encounter and had adapted faster than any of their enemies had anticipated. The tactics that once seemed unorthodox now gave them the upper hand. The battle began with a deafening explosion of weapons fire as the human fleet struck first, hitting the Draveri ships with deadly precision. But the Draveri were no slouches. They fought back fiercely, with a savagery born from years of tradition and a need for revenge. The fight was brutal, and the cost of each victory was steep. For hours, the battle waged, the stars around them filled with the flashes of destruction. But as the last of the Draveri ships fell, humanity's fleet pushed forward, their final destination now clear. The Tribunal's central hub, the heart of the oppressive empire that had nearly wiped them from the galaxy. And then, amid the chaos, as President Sykes watched from Earth's command center, the words appeared on the screen: "Victory. The Tribunal has surrendered." The human fleet had done it. The Tribunal, overwhelmed by humanity's strength, had no choice but to accept the terms of surrender. They had fought not just for survival, but for a new future, one where no species, not even the oldest, most powerful empires, could dictate their fate. The galaxy would never be the same. The era of humanity's submission had ended, and the era of their dominance had begun. The message humanity had sent was clear, and it echoed across the stars. Destruction was your choice. The galaxy is ours to shape. The aftermath of the battle near Lysar Gate left the galaxy on edge. The Draveri, once confident in their superiority, were now reeling from the unexpected retaliation. Their flagship, the Obsidian Fang, lay adrift, its once pristine hull scarred by human weapons. Word of the defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and whispers began to circulate within the Tribunal. The humans had shown the kind of resolve not seen since the great wars of ancient species. Their actions were a defiant response to the Tribunal's demands, one that could no longer be ignored. As the Tribunal began to convene in a rare emergency session, President Alina Sykes stood resolute. She had made it clear that humanity would not bow to the Tribunal's demands, and now the galaxy was watching to see if Earth's resolve would hold. The Tribunal's leaders were furious. The Draveri had failed to crush humanity in one decisive strike, and the consequences were becoming too great to ignore. The first step in their retaliatory campaign came swiftly. The Tribunal, united by their fury, mobilized the full might of their forces, nearly 20 fleets, each manned by some of the most technologically advanced ships in the galaxy. The decision was made. Operation Silence would begin. The mission was simple: eliminate the human threat by wiping out their frontier colonies and breaking their will to fight. On Earth's side, Admiral Arlen Voss prepared for war, gathering his fleet in secret. The Tribunal had underestimated humanity's preparations, and Voss knew it. For years, Earth's military had been quietly developing new weapons and tactics, watching, studying, and learning from every conflict. Humanity had never been more ready for war. "I've seen what they can do," Voss said as he stood before his senior officers, his eyes burning with determination. "The Tribunal has forgotten what it means to be human. They think we fight with arrogance or pride. They don't understand that we fight to survive." The human fleet assembled in the outer reaches of the neutral zone, prepared for the coming assault. Ships gleamed with fresh weaponry, gravimetric disruptors, AI-assisted targeting systems, and kinetic cannons capable of punching through shields that had once been impenetrable to lesser species. Earth's AI War Council, operating from Earth's surface, coordinated the movements of the fleet, calculating every possible scenario with an accuracy no living general could match. The first battle of Operation Silence unfolded with shocking speed. The Tribunal fleets, confident in their numerical advantage, pushed toward the human colonies with the force of a tidal wave. But the humans were ready. As the first Tribunal warships entered the system, the human fleet struck with precision. Entire fleets of the Tribunal were decimated in moments. The humans had learned the weaknesses of their enemies, exploiting them in a series of brutal, unexpected maneuvers. One by one, the Tribunal's ships fell, their superior technology rendered useless against the focused onslaught of humanity's tactics. Human ships, designed to be agile and unpredictable, harried their enemies from every direction. The orbital defenses of human colonies were activated with deadly accuracy, turning their homeworlds into fortresses that could withstand even the most determined assault. The human fleet, driven by sheer willpower, executed surprise attacks that sent shockwaves through the Tribunal's forces. By the time the dust settled, the first wave of Tribunal ships was destroyed, and humanity had proven that their ability to fight was more than just the sum of their technology. It was the power of a species forged by centuries of struggle, a species that fought not for conquest, but for survival. The Tribunal was stunned. A species they had written off as reckless and emotional had just delivered a devastating blow. And the message, loud and clear, was once again broadcast across the galaxy. Destruction was your choice. As the battlefronts continued to rage across the galaxy, humanity's resolve hardened. The war was no longer just about survival. It had become an existential struggle, one that transcended the boundaries of space and politics. The Tribunal had thought them weak, emotional creatures, but with every victory, humanity's reputation spread like wildfire. The message was undeniable. Humans would fight, and they would win. But beneath the surface of this newly forged war machine, the heart of humanity remained, its people. Earth's strength was not just in its advanced technology or its military might. It was in the lives of its people, those who had endured the worst horrors and learned to rise above them. Humanity's ability to fight was born from its scars, its mistakes, and its unyielding desire to never be crushed again. As Captain Arlen Voss stood at the bridge of the Fortress Pride, watching the stars streak by, his mind wandered back to Earth's last war, the one that had almost destroyed them all. The scars of that war still haunted him, as they haunted every human alive. Earth had been on the brink of total collapse. Nations had turned on one another, cities had burned, and entire populations had been wiped out. But from that chaos had risen a new strength, a fierce, unified people who would never again let themselves be subjugated. Voss's thoughts drifted to his father, a soldier in Earth's final war. He had never known the man well, as his father had been killed during one of the fiercest battles of the conflict. The only memory Voss had of him was a letter he had received when he was just a boy, a letter that still burned in his mind. If you are reading this, then I am gone. Do not mourn for me. Mourn for the world we have lost. But know this, son, the war is not over. The fight will never end, and it is your generation's responsibility to finish it. Remember who we are. Never forget what it means to survive. Voss had carried those words with him through every battle since, and they had shaped the man he had become. Earth's children, forged by generations of hardship, had inherited that same resolve. Every soldier, every officer, every civilian knew what it meant to be human, and they would not let their species fall into the same ruin they had once suffered. Lieutenant Sarah Whittaker was one of the many who had been shaped by Earth's tragic history. A pilot who had grown up in the slums of New London, Sarah's family had been torn apart by the global wars that preceded the rise of humanity's spacefaring age. Her mother had died in a refugee camp, and her father, a war medic, had disappeared on a mission. For Sarah, there was no greater purpose than ensuring that humanity would never return to such a fragile state. She had fought her entire life for the chance to be more than just a survivor. Sarah's first combat mission had come when she was barely out of her teens. Her skills as a fighter pilot had been honed in the deadliest of situations, and she quickly rose through the ranks. Now, as part of the human fleet, she flew high-risk raids behind enemy lines, striking with precision and speed. As she prepared to launch from a hangar of the Fortress Pride, she paused, looking at a small, worn picture of her family, now reduced to little more than a memory. Her father's face, young and filled with determination, stared back at her. "This is for you, Dad," she whispered before taking her place in the cockpit. The mission ahead was critical, an attack on a Draveri stronghold that would cripple the Tribunal's offensive capabilities. As Sarah led her squadron into the heart of enemy territory, the tension was palpable. The battle was brutal, but Sarah's precision and skill kept the human fleet one step ahead, as it always had been. With every enemy ship she destroyed, she was reminded of what they were fighting for, the future of humanity. And with each victory, humanity's message spread across the galaxy like wildfire. We will not be forgotten, and we will not be broken. The galaxy had already been thrown into chaos by the growing conflict between humanity and the Galactic Tribunal, but nothing could have prepared the galaxy for the next escalation. The Varnax, an ancient and revered race, whose very name was whispered in awe throughout the cosmos, had declared humanity a threat. For millennia, the Varnax had been seen as the ultimate arbiters of galactic law. They were viewed as gods by lesser species, their wisdom unparalleled, and their power absolute. Their fleets were vast, their technology ancient and incomprehensibly advanced. Yet even the Varnax could not remain untouched by humanity's rise. The Council of the Elders, as the Varnax were known, had watched humanity's response to the tribunal with growing concern. The Varnax saw themselves as the guardians of balance and the bold defiance of the human race, both in spirit and in action, was a threat they could not allow to continue unchecked. It was not just humanity's military strength that concerned them, but something far deeper, humanity's refusal to kneel. One cold, silent morning, a communique arrived from the heart of the Varnax Empire, directed straight to Earth's War Council. The message was simple and final: surrender or face our wrath. President Alina Sykes stood in front of her war room's massive tactical display, staring at the holographic image of the Varnax warfleet poised in deep space. The Varnax had made their decision. They would not allow a species like humanity to defy the ancient order. The threat was not just military, it was existential, a threat from the gods of the galaxy. "We've been given the ultimatum," Sykes said, her voice grave but resolute. "We're not surrendering. We've faced the worst, And we will face them now. Admiral Arlen Voss, standing at her side, spoke with a mix of quiet anger and strategic brilliance. The Varnax may have strength, but we have something they don't. We've been tested. We know what it means to lose everything, and fight anyway. This battle won't be won with ships or weapons alone. Voss turned to his crew, his voice steady but filled with purpose. We are going to teach the Varnax that humanity doesn't bend. We will not break. Not now. Not ever. The battle came quickly. Humanity had been preparing for this moment ever since they learned of the Varnax's interest in their destruction. The humans had hidden a devastating secret weapon for just such an occasion. The Soul Protocol, a series of specially designed antimatter bombs, powerful enough to destabilize the very fabric of space. A weapon so devastating that its use was considered unthinkable by most of the galaxy's military minds. But humanity, forged by necessity and survival, had built it anyway. The battle unfolded at the Varnax capital system, a place that had once been the crown jewel of galactic civilization. The Varnax fleet, led by the colossal flagship Righteous Dawn, advanced, its pristine, godlike ships glinting with the power of millennia. The human fleet, smaller but more agile, braced for impact. As the battle began, the Varnax warships fired devastating energy beams, but humanity's ships dodged with the speed of predators. The human fleet's eye-driven combat systems predicted the Varnax's moves, striking in ways that confused and overwhelmed the Varnax commanders. The Varnax had expected an enemy that fought with brute force. What they didn't expect was the ferocity of human ingenuity. And then, at the heart of the Varnax fleet, the Soul Protocol was deployed. A single bomb, launched from one of humanity's most advanced ships, detonated above the Varnax capital planet. The blast was not just a destruction of matter. It was a wave of energy so intense it warped the very space around it, creating a massive gravitational collapse that destroyed the planet and everything within a vast radius. The shockwave rippled out through the galaxy, sending signals scrambling and disrupting space itself. For the first time in history, the Varnax Empire, the oldest and most revered empire in the galaxy, was shattered. Their once great capital lay in ruins, a cosmic graveyard where no trace of their civilization remained. The message humanity sent to the remaining galactic powers was clear. Destruction was your choice. The Varnax fleet, disoriented and leaderless, broke formation and fled. Humanity had not only survived the Tribunal's wrath, they had decisively struck at the heart of the very empire that had once thought itself untouchable. The galaxy was now forever changed. Humanity had become a force unlike any the stars had seen before, and those who had once looked down on Earth now had no choice but to consider, would they be the next to fall? The Galactic Tribunal was not a place for diplomacy. It was a place where the powerful made their demands, and the weak had little room to speak. The human delegation sat in the sterile, opulent chamber, their eyes narrowed against the oppressive gaze of the Tribunal's council. 12 seats, each occupied by an alien race whose collective history spanned millennia, now turned toward President Elena Sykes. She was the leader of a species that had risen from the ashes of a war-torn Earth, a species that had seen its own ruin and fought its way back into the stars. She didn't flinch under their scrutiny. "I remind you," said the High Speaker of the Varnax, an ancient race with translucent skin and eyes like liquid pools of black, that this summit is an opportunity for Earth to demonstrate its commitment to peace. You have violated the neutrality of the galactic buffer zone, and as such, you are now called to account for your expansionist agenda. A ripple of murmurs spread among the other delegates. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of alien perfumes and the buzz of hidden translators, a reminder that this was a stage for politics, not war. The Draveri, sleek and silver-skinned, and the Creel, large, brutish beings with skin like stone, glared at the humans from opposite ends of the council. The Tribunal represented the old order, a delicate balance of ancient power, where no species could rise too high without disrupting the established equilibrium. We did not seek to disrupt your balance, President Sykes responded, her voice calm, measured. We sought only to survive. Humanity has no interest in your wars or your ancient politics. We have a single goal, the future of our people. Her words were like a knife slicing through the air, and for a moment, the room went silent. The tribunal had already made its decision, but there was something unsettling in her tone. There was a steel in it, a quiet certainty. The High Speaker shifted in his seat, clearly irritated. The tribunal demands that Earth submit to a disarmament treaty. You will surrender your offensive capabilities, withdraw from the neutral zones, and halt all expansion beyond your current borders. It was an ultimatum, a demand that left no room for negotiation. The Draveri leaned forward, their cold eyes flashing with the anticipation of Earth's response. The Creel crossed their massive arms, their growls barely audible as they waited for the human delegation to cower under the weight of the tribunal's will. Sykes leaned forward slightly, her fingers interlaced in front of her, her eyes unwavering. We are not interested in your demands, she said, her voice low but carrying an authority that made the room feel smaller. We will not surrender our sovereignty. We will not disarm. And we will not beg for peace. If war is the price of our survival, then so be it. The High Speaker's eyes widened imperceptibly, a rare flicker of uncertainty crossing his ancient face. Sykes could see it, the underestimation of humanity, the belief that their aggression was the result of ignorance rather than necessity. The tribunal had seen wars between weaker species, but the idea that humanity might stand against them on equal terms was unthinkable. We offer you one final chance, the High Speaker said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. Submit, or face the consequences. Sykes stood. Destruction was your choice, not ours, she said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. We will not bow to your demands. You will learn that we are not a species to be dismissed. With that, she turned and left the council chamber, her delegation following closely behind, leaving the tribunal to process the weight of her words. The stage was set. The galaxy had just received its first warning from the human race. The galaxy had changed, and humanity, now a galactic power in its own right, found itself at the center of a storm. The fall of the Varnax Empire had left a void, a power vacuum that no one was sure how to fill. The once untouchable Varnax were gone, and the Galactic Tribunal was fracturing. New alliances were forming, and old enemies were reevaluating their positions. Among them, the Creel were the first to extend a hesitant olive branch. The Creel were a cunning species, their razor-sharp intelligence matched only by their thirst for control. They saw the collapse of the Varnax as a chance to rise in their place. Their fleets were strong, their spies everywhere, but they were pragmatic, and they recognized the growing power of humanity. Admiral Voss was summoned to a diplomatic meeting with the Creel representatives in deep space, aboard a neutral station that hovered in the shadow of a gas giant. The station was ancient, a remnant of a long-dead civilization that had once tried to unite the galaxy under a single banner. Now it served as the backdrop for what would be humanity's most delicate diplomatic mission yet. As Voss and President Sykes arrived, the Creel ambassador, Isur Vorth, a tall, serpentine figure, greeted them with a sharp smile. His elongated face betrayed little emotion, his golden eyes fixed on them with an intensity that was both calculating and cold. We have much to discuss, humans, Isur Vorth said, his voice smooth like liquid silk. The fall of the Varnax has left many of us unsettled. Some factions seek to avenge them, while others see opportunity in the chaos. You are now an undeniable force. I would suggest we choose to work together, lest we all fall into greater destruction. Sykes studied the Creel ambassador carefully, her expression unreadable. She understood the game they were playing. The Creel were not interested in peace for peace's sake. They were calculating, always seeking an advantage. But in this fractured galaxy, they were one of the few powers capable of matching the tribunal in strength, and that made them a key player. I agree, she said finally, her voice firm. We understand the stakes. We have no desire for war. But the tribunal has already shown us that our survival comes at a price, and we won't be anyone's puppet. Isarvorth's eyes gleamed. Good. Then perhaps we can come to an agreement. You have strength, humanity. But what you lack is the wisdom of ages. We have knowledge, connections, and resources that could ensure your victory. But you will need to make difficult choices. Voss felt the weight of the conversation pressing on him. He had fought for this moment, for the rise of humanity. But now that they had power, he realized how precarious it all was. The Creel weren't offering help out of kindness. Their proposal was a calculated move, a chance to leverage humanity's success for their own benefit. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity's other enemies were not sitting idle. The Draveri, humiliated by the loss of their fleet and the destruction of their military installations, were beginning to regroup. The Draveri's deep sense of pride and ancient warrior ethos made them relentless in their pursuit of revenge. They were not content with vengeance alone. They sought to crush humanity entirely. Their fleets were gathering in secret, their commanders whispering of an all-out assault. The galaxy was on the brink of an all-consuming war, and humanity's allies were not guaranteed. The Creel might provide assistance, but they would demand payment in ways humanity could not yet understand. The Draveri were hunting them. And the tribunal was still very much alive, albeit fractured. Admiral Voss and President Sykes stood on the observation deck, watching the stars pass by as their fleet prepared for the unknown battles ahead. Voss's mind raced, thinking of what the future held. The choices they made now would shape the fate of humanity, and there was no going back. Would they form alliances, however fragile? Or would they risk everything and face the wrath of an entire galaxy? Sykes spoke softly, as if reading his thoughts. We've come this far, Arlen, but I fear the true cost is still ahead of us. Voss turned to her, his jaw set with determination. We knew what we were getting into. The tribunal didn't believe we would survive. Now we show them we will outlast them. The door to the war room slid open, and the last of the fleet's preparations were complete. The next move would be humanity's, and the galaxy would have no choice but to watch.